Marcus at practice?
Yeah.
Tell me he's going to bring Fab there today.
I was there and they were doing some strange things with it.
I don't know what he was shooting with him today. He told me, he's like, Fab wants to go to practice. I'm like, well, that's, I don't really know if that's our priority right now. I was kind of waiting till later on to try to bring him in.
What exactly is like he doing?
I believe we're live on Facebook, but I have that intro. So we're live on YouTube also. And
we have like a, it's kind of, not a fan, I wouldn't say it's more of
so
a,
be careful.
okay, I wouldn't say it's a fan series, but it's more of, some behind the
He's that kind of host, and I saw that one video we did with him at the game.
We've got him and Warriors Dancing Mom coming tomorrow. She was fun. I liked her a lot. Have you met her before?
Briefly.
She's a character. Like, those two hit it off, like, right away. I thought that was kind of fun. But we had them in the old press conference room, like, dancing together before the last home game. It feels like forever ago. And that was pretty cool. So our mics are hot right now, like on Facebook and on YouTube. Okay. I'll make sure not to say anything bad about Marcus.
Yeah, okay, so mics are hot.
Cool. That works.
This link.
So will they leave Friday morning before, or is it going to be Thursday night?
Well, with the time zone change, I would guess they leave Friday morning.
They're leaving Friday for
Yeah,
sure. They're not leaving Thursday.
Practice here Friday and then go?
That's what they did in the Portland series.
Yeah.
But
that's
Or
how
the
I
same
know.
time
Yeah, I
zone.
would. Yeah, and they do it differently, but I would
Yeah.
guess they're going to leave Friday morning, practice Friday afternoon
In Utah.
But
Okay.
that, who knows?
I've asked Ray and Dan, and Ray said he thought they'd practice here, and then Dan said he thought they'd practice it.
Sure.
Yeah,
Utah.
and it's Mike and Steve, and, so you're weighing that, and some of it's just Steve going to travel. with Mike?
That's the question I was going to ask. Do we know, is he going to travel?
No, they're being like, boy.
They don't know.
Yeah.
But he's not going to coach games 1 and 2, so then you're going to put him on a plane for 3,
3 and 4.
I don't think he's going to coach 3 and 4. So do you want him there to not coaching 3 and 4, or do you want him? I don't know. It's going to be strange.
Yeah.
Nick Urine have a little earpiece for. I think it really is he could coach is game 5, but then do you drop him in game 5 after they lost it? It's,
Sure.
then they're already in this incredible flow of the series.
What's funny is like Mike Brown's the guy. Wasn't he the one managing all the timeouts and his
He's helping him, helping him.
Now he's
yeah.
got to manage this too. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of a strategy of whether you bring him back or not.
Yeah. Well, that's not Mike though. That's Kerr and Myers. That's only Kerr and Myers.
Oh, Mary, we added these this week. Right? They're cool. I like them. I didn't just notice that. That'll look good over their 2-shot because we didn't have anything in the back last week. I like it. Looks really good. It's a nice looking set.
So he leads off on the first question.
Yeah, I'm gonna toss it right to you, Anthony, with the Kerr stuff, and then we'll bring it in Tim about knowing that this was why they made this move to bring Mike Brown in months ago, and knowing that this could have been a possibility for that. So yeah, we can go longer, I think, on the front end, and I'll be. Are you just gonna be motioning like? Can you let me know like 10 minutes, like you hit 5 minutes, you hit 10, like that'd just be good for me to know, like I think, then when 20, I guess just 2-0. Maybe not lean. Doing last time. We will be on Facebook. Which one? Mercury News or all of them? Okay.
Courtney's, when you get to her, he's going to have you talk about 30 seconds before he votes.
That's fine. Well, I'm going to be introing that. That's the first segment, and then I'm tossing right to Anthony. Just being like he wasn't at practice. So if he wants to start it then, it won't be probably a 30-second intro. Like that would be like my first one is more on like rambling. Hopefully don't sneeze at all.
We can play it off.
I mean, it's just the dust, the allergies. It's been like a bad spring for
Got the
that.
pollinator going hard.
Oh. Yep, iPad's on silent. Not that anything will pop up here, but.
1 minute.
And they know it's no cold open. It's right. Okay, good. All right, welcome into Bay Area Sports Insiders. Special thanks to those of you joining us at mercurynews.com and eastbaytimes.com. And our first week streaming live on the Mercury News Facebook page. I'm your host, Courtney Cronin. And if we were talking about a different sport other than basketball and the amount of time played in between playoff games, we'd probably be looking at some pretty gnarly playoff beards right now. Obviously, speaking to the sport of hockey, the Warriors, we haven't seen them in action for over a week now. And coming up tomorrow on Tuesday, they tip off in the Western Conference semifinals. Bringing in now our Warriors beat writer Anthony Slater and Tim Kawakami, our Mercury News sports columnist. Guys, it's been a while. I mean, I feel like by the time that this is all passed, we've been to the point now where there's a lot of rust that could be setting in.
Just for us.
Yeah, just for all of us, for the fact that we haven't, been, I guess, at our craft for quite some time. But some pretty big news to start out with. The fact that Steve Kerr has been away from the Warriors since Game 3 of the Portland series. Anthony, he wasn't at practice again on Monday, and there remains some things up in the air. Mike Brown looks like he's going to be coaching games 1 and 2. What do we know so far about if and when Kerr could return?
They're being patient. They don't know when Steve Kerr might potentially return. I mean, as you mentioned, it's going to be Mike Brown in games 1 and 2. Kerr's around. Mike Brown said he's talked to him already twice today before practice, and when he was talking to the media, he said, and I'm about to go call him right now. They said Kerr has popped into the facility for coaches meetings. He has not been there for practice. They're allowing Mike Brown to be the voice to the players. Draymond Green was kind of the voice of the players, as he usually is, came out today and was basically saying, like an injured player, we're going to expect him not to be back until, Bob Myers comes out and says, hey, Steve Kerr's going to be back. So at this point, I think they're preaching patience because they want Steve Kerr to not just have 3 days where he feels good and then it's like, okay, throw him right back on the sidelines, and then suddenly you're in the West Finals, Game 3, and he's not feeling good again. They're saying they want to not only have maybe a week of him feeling good, but a path that says, look, he's figured what the problem is, and he's on his road to recovery.
Yeah, they're looking for a solution for his life. And whether he gets back for coaching in his playoffs, so that's secondary. So you just think of it that way. They're looking for him to feel good again.
Sure.
And then he feels good again, and then you go, like Anthony says, you go a couple days, 3 days, where he's really feeling good, then maybe he's coaching again. So this is going to be some time here.
Yeah, so they've been basically preparing that this could be short, it could be long, and they're also worried about his future after this season
have to
and
be.
what that could be going forward, throughout his career. They brought in Mike Brown for a reason, to replace Luke Walton as that lead assistant last year, Tim, and there's a reason behind that. I mean, Mike Brown's a guy who has head coaching experience with the Cavaliers and high level Cavaliers and the Lakers, LeBron and Kobe. He's coached the superstars before. How does he fit into this role where he's got an MVP lineup right there with 4 MVPs? And that seems like that was part of the rationale, knowing the personalities and just strategy of being in this position before.
Yeah, I mean, they're careful to say they didn't say, okay, when Steve gets sick, we're going to need someone who has been through this before, but clearly there was. I mean, I think most of it was a real personal connection between Mike Brown. Mike Brown was an assistant coach at San Antonio in some of Steve Kerr's later years. They were worked out together. That was the number one thing. But I do think Kerr, who picked him, and also Bob Myers, certainly was involved, general manager, was okay. Unspoken is if we need another 43 games like they got out of Luke Walton, are we going to want to throw someone in there who's never done it before, like Luke, who did fantastically on the fly, or we're going to want someone who's just going to step in? Here's what I did in Cleveland with Steve Kerr's game plan, and I'm not going to flip out. I'm not going to have to, in the middle of a playoff series, by the middle of a playoff series, is going to feel, okay, I've done this before. In the back of their minds, Mike Brown clearly was that. When they were looking for a lot of things, Mike Brown filled a lot of them, and he's doing it right now. Now, we'll see what happens if they get in trouble in a playoff series. But right now, he's been the kind of the stable hand. No one has to worry about everyone else's roles, and he's kind of stepping in and doing everything.
Anthony, I remember a podcast you had early when you first got here, and when Mike Brown got here. You're talking about moving, adjusting to the Bay Area, both of you.
His motorcycles.
Exactly. I mean, kind of going through that at the same time. That was months ago.
Yeah.
How have you seen him, especially in these last few games, but really throughout the season, and just what he's been, what his role was of managing timeouts and playing minutes for everybody, evolving into that? Because he's already been a head coach. We know he can do that. But throughout this journey with the Warriors, where does he stand?
Yeah, I think he's just had like a really kind of happy place in his life. The last few years was an adjustment. Obviously, the second time he got fired in Cleveland, he had apparently gone back to Cleveland, bought a house, thought he was going to be there long term, signed a 5-year deal, and got fired after year 1 there.
Still getting paid for that, by the way.
Went through a divorce. His sons had some transfer stuff, which is still going on apparently today. He committed to Oregon. So he's just kind of going through some different life stuff, and now he's settled in the Bay. He's mentioned how much he loves riding his Harleys around Lake Merritt area, which is where he lives. And now suddenly, he was very comfortable in that lead assistant role, and maybe that was going to vault him to his next head coaching job. Now suddenly, he's thrust into really maybe. I think there's 20 head coaches across the league right now that say, I would trade you right now. You can come be head coach of the team, and I'll take that little interim job you have. Because, there's a chance, better than we probably realize, that Mike Brown could be the head coach of the NBA title contenders, come mid-June.
Not to be remiss throughout all of this, Jaren Collins and Ron Adams have done a pretty good job in their roles. How does that mix work? I mean, it seems like it's kind of, Tim, the same dynamic, but now with Brown in that head seat, how have those two adjusted and maybe picked up more of the slack?
Yeah, they're using it. Bruce Frazier's involved in this too. Willie Green's involved in this. They're used to this because of what they went through with Luke. I really think, and they had to do more with Luke because he had never been a head coach. I just think they click into, here's kind of the roles that we had to fill with Steve out last time, and now Mike Brown's been filling a lot of those already. We just fill in those gaps, and everyone kind of bumps up a chair. Ron Adams keeps that defensive mindset. Obviously, Mike Brown's a very defensive-minded coach. Other guys work with the offense. But I know Anthony's been talking to some of these guys, and maybe he can talk a little bit more about what the
actually, I talked to both of those guys and Bob Myers, and I think it's just kind of a tactical layering of a coaching staff by Bob Myers, where you'd think there'd be a lot of coaching staffs where this, as we mentioned, this premier opportunity opens up, and maybe all 3 assistants are like, I want to be that. Yeah, sure. Jaren Collins is 38. He saw what happened for Luke Walton when he jumped in that role. Now Luke Walton is head coach of the Lakers. Jaren Collins, a humble guy, a patient guy. I mean, how many times do we have to see him after practice just taking JaVale McGee across the perimeter?
And that does take some patience.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, that just shows kind of his willingness to be a Ron Adams type, where Ron Adams could sit there and go, I got way more head coaching, assistant coaching experience. How about, can this be my shot? No, Ron Adams is sitting there. As Mike Brown's talking to the media, has 20 reporters around him. Ron Adams is over there working with Damian Jones on left-handed hook shots, which is clearly something for the future. They just have guys that are fine in their roles, no egos, just want to be assistant coaches. That's important in this situation.
It's been a good, and they're being paid very well.
Yes.
So, which helps. The Warriors are paid their guys, really support that very well. So when these things get juggled around, people know, one, there's a good jobs. I want one of them. And two, when they need to kick up, they're well compensated for that too.
All right, so a week ago, the Warriors played their last game of the first round series against Portland. They swept, so 4 games, clean sweep. Then they went home. They had the week off. Taking a look at this Portland series, obviously we don't want to dwell on it too much. They're already focusing on, a huge opener tomorrow night against Utah. Defensively, this team, it's kind of overshadowed. They held one of the most dynamic backcourts, Anthony, to 40% shooting throughout this series, which is the lowest of any team in the playoffs this year. Can you give them a grade? I mean, how do you grade what the Warriors were able to do by closing out Portland and really taking care of business, what they had set out to do?
I mean, their performance is an A. The only thing that comes from that Portland series that concerns you is Kerr's health and Durant's calf, which happened in the Portland series. But as far as their performance on the court, with or without Kevin Durant, they did everything they needed to. They blew him out a few times. The only close game was game 1, and they separated in the fourth quarter with defense. Everyone wants to talk about, I think it was a 43-16 start to game 4 to really close it out.
Yeah.
The 16 was just as impressive as the 43, and just what they did to them in the center position, to me, was the key in that series. That's their low, money slot where they had minimum guys and a room exception with Zaza, and they really dominated that series. I mean, JaVale McGee was by far the best center in that series. Now, moving forward, that's kind of a question spot, but A across the board.
Yeah,
Not to mention that game 3, the coming back from 16 points in the second half.
That was the big one, and I'd give them a different grade. I'd give them W. 4.
Win.
That's all that matters in playoffs. That's all that matters. And I do think people are looking at that first quarter and saying, my God, the Warriors have figured it out. It's over. Durant's going to do this. Steph's going to do that. That was a unique situation. Sure. We know the Warriors can get there, and no other team can get there, maybe unless LeBron's going grace for Cleveland. But I don't think you're going to just see, you can't just cut and paste that, go, this is what they're going to do against Utah, and then this is what we're going to do against San Antonio, and they're going to do this against Cleveland, because it's just a rhythm thing, and Portland is kind of built to be beaten by the Warriors. Mm-hmm. They have talented players, but not at the spots that really bother the Warriors. You throw 2 little shooting guards at them, the Warriors are going to have to figure it out, which took them a while. Game 1, they scored 75. Warriors figured it out, and then it's over. Not going to be the case in every other series. So I wouldn't just say, okay, they've got it, and that's been a week. And that first quarter was, now they might do it in the Utah series. I don't think it's going to be like that. I think they're going to have to, as a usual playoff series, even when you're this superior, you have to figure it out along the way. And Portland didn't really make them figure it out here and there, not really. And once the Warriors turned it on, it was lights out.
So some new challenges head the Warriors' way in the second round of the playoffs. The Utah series begins tomorrow night, Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. tip-off at Oracle Arena. And the Warriors, we mentioned, they've had a lot of time off. The Jazz, not so much. They finished up on Sunday in a 7-game series with the Clippers. And now, taking a look at the style of play, that's probably the biggest glaring difference here, Anthony. Both teams, polar opposites of the spectrum. The Warriors, they like to play fast. It's how they've gotten such, an efficient offense, up-tempo. And the Jazz like to suffocate teams that do that with their defense. How do these styles clash? And, how can you picture this matchup, of just completely opposite ends of the spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, pace is probably the best way to look at that, where, the Warriors this season played about 103 possessions per game. It's up and down. That Warriors-Blazers series, which matched up and down teams, was about 104. Jazz, meanwhile, last in the league, 93 possessions per game. The Clippers series, they drug, LA down 91 possessions per game. And you mentioned the defense, and yes, they will, they're not just going to allow the easy run out threes like Portland will at times. They're going to make you work, make you have to get a good shot. But they can also strangle you offensively, where Draymond Green, I thought, had a pretty good quote, a stat earlier in the week when he was talking about Utah leads the league. They take about 10 or 11 shots per game that are within the last 4 seconds of the shot clock. And he said most teams are panicking there. It's like, 5 on the clock, somebody get a 3 up. Utah will still do 2 more passes and work to a shot, and they have no problem in those situations. So they know the efficiency gap between themselves and the Warriors, and they just want the game to be shorter, and they want it to be close at the end. They want to try to steal a game. Yeah,
Tim, they haven't been fully healthy. The Warriors haven't. They're 2-1 against Utah in the regular season, but they haven't seen a full strength Utah team. And now on Tuesday, Derek Favors might not even be playing.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. He hobbled through that last series. Gobert, missed a game or 2 in that last series. So we'll see. You go through a 7-game. That's why you don't want to go through 7-game series before you play the Warriors, because you're going to speed it up. That's why, when Portland dropped Nurkic in the middle of it, they go, that's not the team you drop an injured center in the middle of. So we'll see. But Yeah, the Warriors have had plenty of time to rest up. Utah's looked like it felt like they just finished the game about 2 minutes ago, Game 7, and now they're flying up here. Got to practice and play tomorrow. But Utah does create some things for them. I mean, I've covered a lot of Warriors playoff series recently. You look at the players who caused them trouble. Portland only had those two guards. Utah's got like 6 or 7. Boris Diaw, Gordon Hayward, George Hill, Rudy Gobert. These are Joe Ingles. These are interesting players that kind of can get into the crevices of the Warriors' D and are big enough on the perimeter to maybe mess around with Steph and Clay a little bit. Not saying they're better. Warriors are better at every position. I'm just saying when you build a team full of medium talents, and maybe Hayward's the one excellent talent, the Warriors have to figure this out, and they're going to see some things that they don't love, and they're going to have to kind of work around there. But again, they've had all this time. Their guys are back. Well, I assume Barnes is going to play, and we'll see about Livingston. I assume they're both going to play. At least they're both going to play much of the series if they don't get hurt again. They've got too much depth. It's just going to be an interesting kind of chess match because Utah does make you think it through. You can't just roll the ball out there and go. You can't against Portland. Against Utah, you can't, which I give them credit for, and it's going to make this series a little more interesting.
And you mentioned Rudy Gobert. He's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, Anthony, just like Draymond Green. I don't know if we call that really our matchup to watch there, but it's certainly an interesting one given the differing styles of defense for both of them. How do you see, who wins that matchup between the two?
Well, look, I think Draymond put it best earlier in the week. He says he can't play defense against Rudy Gobert's defense. Draymond Green is going to have a huge impact on the series. I'm looking at Rudy Gobert because that is the only position where the Jazz are better, at the center. And Rudy Gobert, he had the knee injury, opening, I think, 13 seconds into the first round. It looked like it was potentially going to be a bad knee injury. He comes back a few games later, but he hasn't looked himself at the end of that Clippers series. Had an ankle tweak. Leads the league in shot blocks. He's a huge rim protector, but where he is underrated is he's more agile than people think. He can get out on the perimeter. He's a little Steven Adamsy. Remember when Adams could kind of get out and at least be capable on the perimeter last year? If he can do that, he can really bother the Warriors. If he can be okay on Steph and maybe block him from behind. But if he's limited and he's more Enes Kantery, then that's a big problem for the Jazz.
That would not be a good thing for the Jazz if Enes Kanter's name is ever raised in comparison to Rudy Gobert or anybody of theirs. But yeah, Gobert is someone the Warriors have to game plan against, and there aren't a lot of those guys. That their offense has to go, wait a minute now, stop. There's Kawhi Leonard, and there's Rudy Gobert, and maybe LeBron when LeBron's in the finals, and that's it. So that's why another one, you circle this series, you circle Gobert, you'll see how it's going to, again. But again, they have a guy named Kevin Durant who's pretty good. And so they have these other things that they can throw at you, but they're going to have to use them in this series. And I think they will, but they're going to have to. They didn't really need to use everything in the last series. They're going to need to use most of everything. I do compare this with the Memphis series in 2015, where Memphis had them. This is as panicked as the Warriors have ever been in this run with Kerr. Kerr was as uptight as he's ever been. Warriors had to figure it out in Game 4, and they did on the road. I don't think Utah's as good as Memphis back then, but it's going to be similar kind of questions are going to be asked of the Warriors. And they've got Durant now.
And how important is Steph Curry's defense against a guy like George Hill? He's getting older, and it's like he's only getting better with age, shooting 40% from the field this year, 16.9 points per game. It's the third straight year he's shot that well from the field. It's not the same backcourt matchup that we saw in the first series, but certainly he's been, and we didn't see him play in December. How does Curry factor into that, given what he's going to do on the offensive end? We've got to focus in on his defense.
Yeah, they can make Steph play defense. Now, maybe at some point they might slide Clay over there or Iguodala over there to Hill, move Curry to one of the wings. But then those wings are pretty good, too. So they have some different kind of pieces. I think George Hill is just going to have to really have a great series for Utah to be in it at all. He's going to have to make plays. He's going to have to D up on Curry. I think he's going to defend Curry. And he's going to have to get into the lane, cause some issues, maybe feed it to Gobert. That's how you kind of scramble the Warriors' defense. And it's going to be George. Hayward's a playmaker. They've got some other semi-playmakers. But George Hill's the one I think that can get into the Warriors' defense and then make them scramble. And that's when they're not at their best.
So after missing 19 games at the end of the regular season, Kevin Durant comes back, then sustains the calf injury. The Warriors worked him back into the mix there, coming back in against Portland. Pretty decent stretch there, except for the 3 turnovers. Then he has a week off, so you throw him back in, you pull him back out. And now he's got a unique challenge to where he has Gordon Hayward and Joe Johnson, both, Anthony, to game plan for. What does this last week look like for Kevin? I mean, how have they made sure that he was able to stay fresh, not let that rust set in after going back and then coming back out?
They've scrimmaged a few times. He's been eager. He talked about really wanting to play in Game 3 and pushing them to let him play in Game 3 that last series, and they said no. Then they gave him a 20-minute restriction in Game 4. Ends up playing 21. He wants to play. He wants to play well. He wants his name out there. He wants people to realize, look, he's not coattailing this team to a title, and he is about to get his chance. This is a ladder for him potentially right now. Where look, the Blazers small forwards, it's a black hole there. It's not good, but he's now Gordon Hayward All-Star, Joe Johnson former All-Star. He gets past. It's like he's playing a video game and going through the levels, because then it's going to be potentially Kawhi Leonard in the West Finals, and then what's following Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James. I mean, this is Kevin Durant's time. In his mind, he needs to stay healthy. He needs that cap to be fine, but he can make some noise. He can outplay some of the best players in the league kind of steadily. Then he feels like people can't say, hey, you kind of just rode the Warriors to the title. He wants to be a major factor that got them to the title. And
the Warriors have the goal continuously of remaining healthy in this series, as they did in Portland, to be able to continue that longevity that is just required for this long stretch. We're now at the beginning of May. Should they make the finals, that's a long ways away. They should get a few key pieces back that they were able to, beat Portland without Kevin Durant for those first 3 games, and then without Sean Livingston and Matt Barnes. Tim, how does that matchup change when you add those 2 key pieces in off the bench? What kind of difficulty should that provide Utah?
Yeah, just more wing defenders, really, is the way I think the Warriors look at it. The veterans who they could throw at a Joe Johnson if they need someone to go get him for 3 possessions in a row. Someone, maybe another ball handler if they're jumping on Steph, so you have Livingston. Livingston's really kind of become a 2 and a 3, not a point guard in this new rotation. But it gives Steph a little bit of ease the pressure a little bit. Depth, and I think Utah's a series really they're going to need that, just because Utah's got all these guys: Rodney Hood, Joe Ingles, Joe Johnson. These wing players, Gordon Hayward, who are going to take not just one guy. Like usually, Iguodala takes Hayward. He has taken Hayward out of games before. Well, then someone's got to go guard Joe Johnson. Then someone's got to go Joe Ingles. There's just extra guys that Utah's got. And I think this is a series where Barnes isn't going to play a ton of minutes. Livingston may not play that much, but if McCaw isn't playing great, if Ian Clark isn't playing, these are guys who just plug right in. That's this Warriors super team that we keep talking about, we keep hearing about. They got guys, and they just swept Portland with some different rotations. You just plug these guys back in, and maybe you say, okay, Livingston, you handle the ball for 3 minutes. That's all you need. Then come right back out, and by the way, then you got Steph Curry coming back in. That's why this team is the team that we know and we've covered and we've written about.
So on the other side of the Western Conference semifinals, the San Antonio Spurs and the Houston Rockets will be matching up and facing off. That's, you have potentially, the MVPs right there, both in Kawhi Leonard and in James Harden. Kawhi had to carry that team throughout the entire Memphis series, really until the series got tied 2-2. And what we saw with James Harden, that pace of play was able to stifle Oklahoma City down the stretch there. I'm going to start with you on this, Anthony. If the Warriors can pick, however this series is going to go, who would they want to face in the Western Conference Finals, given, just how they've played against them in the regular season? I mean, probably the best game of the regular season was that double overtime in December there against the Rockets.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would maybe say they want to play the Spurs, but I really think it's Houston. Look, Houston has the variables, the math that people want to talk about it, where they can hit, they can hit 23s in any game. But I just think the Warriors are a much better version of Houston. Houston's not a high percentage three-point team. I mean, they're just very high volume, and the Warriors were the best, defensive three-point team this season. If you look at the numbers when the Warriors went into Houston, won both games this season, I think the Rockets were something like 6 of 30 from 3 and then like 7 of 33. And when the Rockets aren't hitting threes, the variables go both ways. They can, kind of screw the math the other way. And I think it's Houston just because San Antonio is just built to give you a challenge in the playoffs. Neither is super ideal, but I think they prefer Houston.
Yeah, I think it's Houston, but I think you do want it, just as a casual observer, you want them to see the Spurs. They haven't played the Spurs yet in the Kerr era in the playoffs. Played in the Mark Jackson era. Played them good, by the way, in the Mark Jackson era. You kind of want to see that Kerr, Popovich, Kawhi, and Steph, and Draymond. I think the Warriors are better than the Spurs. I think they proved it in that last regular season game, but I think Houston would be the easier matchup just because you get into an up and down game and you've got Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Kevin Durant, you're going to win. Usually, I mean, they've got a ways to guard Harden. They're not that worried about Ryan Anderson. They're not that worried about some other guys. Eric Gordon might be a little bit of an issue, but if you just say, okay, what style they're going to play? They're going to play this. Okay, Warriors take that one. Spurs a little different, although the Spurs have some issues with the Warriors too. But I think Houston would be the easier one. I think it's better for the basketball fan if it's the San Antonio Spurs.
All right, getting ready for round 2 of the playoffs, the Western Conference semifinals tipping off at Oracle Arena. 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday. We will have full coverage from that game over at mercurynews.com in an episode of Bay Area Sports Insiders. The analysis from that game will be available on Tuesday night. Be sure to give these two a follow. They will keep you updated on the latest with the Warriors as the playoff march continues. For Tim Kawakami and Anthony Slater, I'm Courtney Cronin. Thanks for watching.